Forget it. It's too risky. I'm through doing that.
Tarantino's movies often feel like he just lets his pen go, first creating an interesting scene and then building the story around it, even if that means he ends up starting in the middle. Films like Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill don't progress in an entirely straight line. Sometimes the first thing we see actually happens halfway through or even at the end of the timeline. Tarantino, though, finds a way to make it work, to not feel like a half-hearted attempt to hook the audience with the film's most dramatic moment. Sure, he might thrust you into what feels like the apex of the story, but he makes sure to contextualize it over the rest of the film so that it feels natural. Like his choice to move through the plot out of order not only helps the experience, but optimizes it, making you feel like it can't work any other way. He accomplishes this by transitioning from one scene to the next without losing narrative momentum, keeping the audience interested by presenting new information without immediately explaining it, which forces us to analyze the dialogue, the shots, the music in order to piece together the story, identifying the relationship between one scene and the next. In Kill Bill, for example, he breaks the film into parts, starting with Chapter 1, but we don't realize until later that the order of the chapters doesn't exactly follow the chronological timeline of the story, with Chapter 2 actually taking place before Chapter 1. Despite this approach though, the film never becomes confusing, the information we see always feeling motivated, like it has a clear reason to be there, even if it occurs before an event we've already seen. For instance, the first chapter of Kill Bill revolves around a deadly fight, one that we initially only have the prologue as context for. But over the course of such an emotionally charged action scene, the audience will ask questions, and though this first scene answers some of them itself, why are they fighting, who are they, it doesn't answer all of them, which gives the following scenes their own purpose before they even begin, to answer the remaining questions, which automatically makes them interesting.
It's a goddamn massacre, Pop.
Now, Tarantino doesn't restructure the timeline haphazardly. He respects time, he just isn't bound by it, choosing to disrupt its flow only when needed. However, this kind of time manipulation doesn't happen often. Movies tend to present their narratives almost entirely in chronological order, and even when they do restructure the timeline, they typically make it clear to the audience from the top of the scene, oftentimes through some type of text. 6 weeks earlier or something like that. They want the audience to have a sense of clarity throughout the entire film, to know where each new scene stands relative to the previous scenes, even when it doesn't follow the usual logic of time.
Now's the fucking time!
But sometimes the engagement comes from not knowing when something takes place. Does this scene happen before or after the one I just saw? I enjoy buying into the default mechanics, believing that a scene happens directly after another, only for the context, not a title card, to reveal that it doesn't. It feels like I'm solving a mystery. So, though I didn't know it at first, the same techniques Tarantino used in Kill Bill and Pulp Fiction also appeared in the 2024 film called Dead Male. While still considered horror, it goes so far beyond it, presenting a collection of interesting characters in a unique story that separates itself even further through its non-linear structure that plays around with time to such a degree that it becomes hard to say when the present actually is. You see, Dead Male manipulates its story's overall timeline even tighter than most other films, even ones that also present events out of order. While many films make use of extended flashback sequences, the ones in Dead Male feel different, more compelling, not like the movies going back in time simply to reveal information necessary for the plot. No, it still feels like it's moving forward despite going backwards. It succeeds in this by pairing its flashbacks with its characters, starting a new sub-story through a different perspective. As one story reaches its climax, the film begins a new one, but through the eyes of a different character, which allows the film to move to an earlier point in the timeline without becoming redundant. You see, each character has their own information, and as we follow them, we generally only know what they know. But when we follow a different character, our pool of information expands, potentially reframing the entire story. As it moves back and forth in time, it leaves some questions unanswered, forcing the audience to wonder how, when, or even if they'll return to them. The examples of dramatic irony, moments where we know something that the characters don't, become even more powerful when we come back to a scene that's already happened, because with a new perspective, we gain access to new information. For instance, after jumping backwards in time to revisit a previous scene, we may now understand the desires or the motivations or the background of a character that we didn't understand before. However, some of the other characters may not understand these things since they still only have the information we had when we were seeing things through their perspective. Essentially, our information is tied to the characters, and the characters' information is tied to their perspectives, and their perspectives are tied to the time. So as we change time, we gain information, even if some of the characters don't. And with all this being the case, if we do know the outcome of the scene, having already seen it, we feel even more helpless to stop it since it's already happened, and we can only watch the events unfold as we move closer to the same tragedy the film showed us half an hour ago. The way Dead Male keeps the timeline hidden, not saying things like 6 weeks later, and forces you to figure it out yourself, makes the information we have even muddier. It never feels confusing though. Despite how dramatically it shifts perspectives, Dead Male smoothly transitions between them, developing each one so thoroughly that it doesn't feel jarring when they change. You see, most people will let a film take chances. We're open to creative choices, but if we invest time into something different, we want it to pay off. So not every shot needs to directly follow the previous one. At some point though, all the loose threads the film created by cutting the timeline should have an explanation or some value in doing things unconventionally, and Dead Male understands this. It makes the most of that quick bit of time after beginning a new story, a new perspective, by creating a compelling relationship and raising interesting questions, keeping the viewer hooked as it expands upon this new story, promising to eventually connect it back to the original. Dead Male truly captures the power of perspective, how changing whose information we have influences our emotions, our experience. It forces us to reevaluate our priorities, what characters we value, what items are truly important. It makes you reconsider moments that have already happened, the new information providing a new interpretation, reframing the truth. This roundabout structure serves the primary antagonist more than anyone else, adding layers to his character that mirror the story. We see his personality shift much like the film's timeline does, with various characters experiencing him at different points, resulting in a variety of unique perspectives of the same person. His volatility, the rapid decay of his temperament, fits with the film's back and forth structure. You might have noticed that the film also has a strange appearance, like it comes from an old VHS tape. Now, this style threw me off at first, but as I kept watching, it started to permeate every frame, leaving an imprint not just on the visuals, but on the story, so much so that I can't even imagine the film looking any different. With the flat colors and film grain, the characters have an almost cartoonish appearance. Everything feels like it has this subtle jittery movement, which to me represents the visual element alongside the film's subject matter and story structure. These choices all fit together to capture the filmmaker's unique vision in a way that feels cohesive despite so many opportunities to fail. And I guess it doesn't hurt that it reminded me of one of my favorite writers. Thanks for watching.